you've been there. The moment that something didn't add up, the moment that you're kind of sitting there going, I don't think this feels right. And then you realize that you were correct. It was indeed weird behavior, but you talked yourself out of it anyway. And I know that because that is exactly what emotional manipulation is designed to make you do. It's specifically built to make you override your own instincts and replace them with somebody else's version of reality. And the reason that it works is not because you're gullible or naive. It's because nobody taught you what it actually feels like from the inside while it's happening. And here's the thing I think people get wrong about this. Because the advice is always just like, trust your gut. And that sounds right, but trusting your gut is genuinely hard when you don't have a solid relationship with yourself yet. Because your gut needs something solid to stand on. It needs to know your actual values, your actual feelings, the things that are true about who you are. And if somebody else has slowly been rewriting those things for you, then your gut only has bad information to go off of. And that's not necessarily your fault. That's just what manipulation does. So today we're going to talk about what emotional manipulation looks like in real time, not in retrospect. Because yes, when you're out of it and you look back, you can go, oh God, I was definitely being manipulated there. But it's important to know what it looks like while you're in it, and it's important to build a relationship with yourself that's solid enough so that it will make it clear when you're going through it, and so you can actually have the balls to get out of it. By the end of this episode, you are going to understand the specific signals that can help you understand that manipulation is happening. You're going to understand why you've talked yourself out of it before, and you're going to have a tool that you can use in real time for the next time that it happens. Before we get into it, if you don't know me, my name's Haley. I'm on a mission to become my best self. I'm obsessed with all things fitness, healing, and productivity, and this is Healing with Hale. In this season, we are focused on escaping toxic environments, so all episodes are geared towards helping you escape whatever toxicity might be surrounding you. And this one is what happens before you might even realize that you're in a toxic situation at all, because you're going to learn how to read the signs that are there so that you know how to escape it once you're in it. We are going to cover this in 3 parts. First, we're going to go over what emotional manipulation actually looks like, then why we talk ourselves out of it when it's happening, and then the actual tool that you can use to start catching it in real time before it's too late. I think the reason that emotional manipulation is so hard to catch is it doesn't feel like it's something that someone is doing to you. A lot of times it just feels like a conversation, or it feels like the other person is the one with the problems and you just have to try to help them manage it. So here's what it actually feels like, and I want you to think about if any of this sounds familiar. You might feel confused in a conversation where you shouldn't feel confused at all. It might be a conversation with solid facts and the facts are there and you're looking at them, but you can't understand why they're not making sense. You might feel guilty, but you're not really sure what you did. Somehow in the conversation you became the problem and you're not really sure how it ended up there. You might feel like you need to apologize, but if somebody asked you why you need to apologize, you wouldn't have an answer. You might feel like you're being unreasonable, even though nothing that you're asking for is actually unreasonable at all. And the most specific one, you might feel like you're going crazy. Your memory of what happened and their version of it are so completely different that you start to wonder, am I remembering that wrong? Those feelings are not a sign that you're too sensitive or that you're reading into things too much. They are more like signals, and learning to look at them as signals instead of evidence that you're too sensitive or that you're the problem is one of the most important things that you can do. Every time I would get in a fight with my old friend and she would be like, you shouldn't hang out with that person, or I don't think you should be friends with them, she always framed everything as, I know you better than you know yourself. And looking back on it, that is one of the most toxic, manipulative things anybody has ever said to me in my life. But in the moment, I was like, oh, I must be the problem. She's trying to help me out. She's trying to look out for me. And I think that is the core of emotional manipulation, because anybody who's manipulating you is trying to make you think you can't trust yourself, but you can trust me, so you should trust me. And a lot of us end up thinking that that's fact. And then we go, oh, I should just trust this other person because they obviously know better than me. And a lot of the reason that I personally gave so much of my decision-making skills and all of my thoughts to this other person was because I didn't have a strong enough relationship with myself to know, oh, this really isn't something that I want, or this is something that I want to do. I didn't have any kind of ground to stand on because I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what my values were, and I just didn't trust myself. So even though I had signals that maybe this wasn't right, maybe this was kind of weird, I just pushed them down because I didn't have any ground to stand on. So why do we override the signal? I'm sure if you're watching this, you've probably also had moments where you've been like, something is wrong there, and then you just explained it away. And I think if you can understand why you explained it away, that makes it a lot less likely for you to end up in the same exact situation again. And the first reason we ignore the signals is because manipulation is almost always tied or wrapped up in something that seems reasonable. And that's why so many manipulators get away with it, because they know that if they said something that is flat out completely unreasonable and just outrageous, then somebody would be like, ooh, that's definitely a red flag. So they say something that's reasonable enough, but also doesn't really make sense in the context of whatever's going on, because then it gives them just enough standing to be like, no, this is reasonable. What are you talking about? The fact that you think this isn't reasonable is actually crazy. That's proof that you're crazy. And so then your brain goes, oh my God, I must be crazy. That's so true. And then you drop it. And the second reason that we ignore the signals is because recognizing signals requires you to be strong enough in your own sense of self to notice when something is trying to pull you away from those things. And if you don't have that that yet, if your sense of self is being dismantled by the person who is emotionally manipulating you, then you don't have any kind of reference point to measure anything against. So then you just defer all of your thoughts to this other person, and it feels like they're helping you, but really they're just trying to erase who you are. And the third reason is history, because unfortunately, if somebody has fooled you before or tricked you or whatever it is, your brain is going to go, well, they were right the last time, so now I just have to assume that they're right all the time, because obviously they were right once, so they're going to be right again. I obviously must be the problem. And while it makes sense in the moment, it is one of the most damaging things that could ever happen to you, because over time you are just eroding away any kind of sense of self-confidence. Every single little piece of you is just being damaged because you are learning to just override all of your own instincts. And eventually what happens is you start to override your own instincts before this manipulator even has to say anything to you. You just start doing it in your own mind, and at that point you are doing the manipulator's job for them. So what the fuck do we actually do about this? And before we get into the steps, just a friendly reminder that this whole season is designed with actionable steps to help you actually escape toxicity. So if you're finding any of this useful, please subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. So step number 1 is to build your baseline before you need it. And you'll notice this is kind of a common thread in some of these episodes, but this one is very foundational because literally your whole life depends on it. You need to know your actual values, your actual feelings, the things that are true to who you are at your core before you end up in a manipulative situation. Because in that moment, you are not going to have the clarity to try to sit there and figure out whether or not something aligns with who you are and who you want to be. And that is exactly what I mean when I say that your gut feeling requires you to have an actual foundation and an actual relationship with yourself in order for it to work. So this one can get a little bit abstract here, but you really want to just try to write down all of your core values, and not something that's just like kindness or loyalty, but things that are like, I believe I'm capable of knowing what's good for me. I believe that people are allowed to hang out with whoever they want to hang out with. Things that are true to who you are at your core. You might even say something like, I believe that someone who loves me will never try to control my decision. And there's not going to be a right or wrong answer here. It's really just whatever you can think of in the moment, and you can always come back and add on to this list later. But the important thing is that you have it written down and you have these things decided, so that when somebody says one of the things that contradicts something on that list, you're not going to have to sit there and try to justify whether or not you agree with that or whether or not they might be right, because you've already made the decision on how you feel about that specific thing. And step number 2 is to trust the first feeling, not the version that you tried to explain away. I think I talked about this in one of the narcissist episodes as well, and it is very similar, but you really want to trust that feeling right as it's happening, because that is almost always one of the most honest feelings that you're ever going to experience. And the reason that manipulation works is because it takes that gap from when you first have that emotional response of like, oh, I don't like this, or I don't like that they said that. And then the manipulation works in that gap between that first experience and then 10-15 minutes later when you guys are having a conversation, and that gap is what allows them to be like, oh, you didn't actually feel that, or no, the fact that you felt that is totally wrong. So you want to start paying attention to what you feel immediately when something happens, and try to write it down, try to text it to somebody, try to just make a mental note of it in that moment, because that feeling is your emotional response, and then you trying to explain it away is usually their voice inside your head trying to justify it. And the sooner you can understand that, the harder you will be to manipulate. Just because you didn't have the tools to act on it before does not mean that you have to stay in the same situation for fear of starting over. So your task for this week is, anytime you feel confused or guilty without a reason, or like you've suddenly become the problem in the conversation, try to stop before you respond and either take a mental note or just write down in 3 simple sentences what is going on. And write it down as just the fact, no interpretation, no meaning behind it, just write down what is going on. Because you have been a reliable narrator of your life all the way up until this point, and somewhere along the way, somebody else is trying to convince you that you are not that reliable narrator. So I really hope that this episode is the beginning of you deciding to not believe that anymore. Please drop a comment if this episode hit for you, because I really hope that we can all escape any kind of toxicity or emotional manipulation that might be surrounding us. Until next time, be kind to your mind, to your body, and to others, and happy healing.